And our guy Slate's right here on the River Islands guest line, our Warrior Insider. Great work on The Athletic. Anthony Slater, kind enough to squeeze in a few minutes for us because there's just a lot going on. Slates, how you doing tonight, man?
How are y'all?
We're doing great, man, and I really love what you wrote and dropped just a few hours ago. Can you share for our listeners the scene on Friday night with Joe Lacob and Kevin Durant's agent?
Yeah, Rich Kleiman, who, I mean, you guys probably remember him from the Durant days. He's been with KD since Oklahoma City, actually. He was very much at the forefront of moving Durant from Oklahoma City to the Warriors, and he was seated next to Joe Lacob. You guys see it. Joe Lacob always has guests, right? Sometimes it's Niners players or, various, minority owners, stuff like that. It was Rich Kleiman on Friday night, and that, it was very obvious to see to anyone looking that, conversing throughout the game, bridge club, halftime, post game. And I mean, I put it in the story. I don't have any type of details necessarily on the conversations taking place, but I did find it interesting that Bob Myers is 10 feet away doing the game on ESPN and did go into the bridge club post game.
Yeah, and he and Rich, I'm sure, were just catching up on old times. Remember that time where you had your player come to our team? And if we think about the dream scenario, Anthony, and they're having a conversation about what would it take, and would Kevin want to come back? Would he want to come back, and what would it take?
There's a Jimmy Butler domino and a Bradley Beal domino right now that is creating this scenario, right? I think we all know some of the dynamics at play, most of the dynamics at play. But, I mean, if you're the Warriors and you're willing to play this kind of waiting game right now, Miami's got to make a decision by Thursday afternoon. Phoenix has obviously been Butler's preferred destination for extension purposes. It's pretty well known Kevin Durant would like Jimmy Butler to be there, but the only way for Phoenix to get that done while keeping Durant and Booker is to get Bradley Beal somewhere. Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. Again, this is knowledge everybody knows, but I just kind of want to go through it quick. And he's probably the least desirable contract in the league at this point. So if Phoenix cannot get anything done there, where's Jimmy going? Is he staying in Miami? That seems unlikely at this point. I mean, certainly Miami could take this to the summer and prefer, otherwise. But if it is to the Heat, if it is to the Warriors, there's other teams that you hear are kind of on the fringes of it, Milwaukee's, Memphis, something like that. Then the Warriors kind of gain a level of leverage if Bradley Beal is unmovable by Thursday.
Anthony Slater with us here on Willard and Dibbs 95.7 The Game. I think that's the other thing to really kind of point out. A lot of people went to bed this weekend after the Brian Windhorst tweet thinking that the Warriors and Jimmy Butler are no longer a match. But you say there is still a window. So what would you say is kind of the current situation and the likelihood of a pairing there?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy's clearly still trying to get to Phoenix, and Phoenix is still clearly trying to get that done. And I would say the Warriors are kind of like, the third in this tango, looking around going, will somebody come get Beal? Do they think could they get in that mix? What's Durant's future potentially? I mean, I think it's obvious to talk about Kevin Durant's contract situation, right? He did not sign an extension this summer. He's at the same point Luka Doncic is, which is 1.5 years left. He's at the same point De'Aaron Fox was at, where he really kind of muscled his way out of Sacramento. Obviously, that's almost become not the new free agency because there is a level of team control. Obviously, you could take it to the summer if you want, but you guys have noticed, right? Free agency isn't what it used to. Big name players don't really get there. They try to get somewhere and sign an extension. So there's always ticking clocks, and I think that's some of the dynamics at play. And again, I think if somehow Phoenix finds a place to plant Beal and can get Butler done, then the Warriors will probably have to look elsewhere. But that has not happened at this point.
And if they end up looking elsewhere, and maybe it's to a lesser player, no disrespect to Vucevic or to Cam Johnson, what do you think the perception is among the fan base? Did what happened over the weekend, did that change everyone's expectations outside the building to where fans now, you think, are clamoring for a really big move like the other teams?
I mean, you'd have to ask them. I'm sure it certainly painted this idea that, hey, the biggest rival down in Los Angeles just picked up Luka Doncic. Why didn't you get Luka Doncic? Warriors don't employ Anthony Davis. Clearly Nico Harrison identified who he wanted to trade Luka Doncic for, went and got him. I mean, I guess theoretically he could have asked for Steph Curry. What do you say if you're the Warriors in that situation? Because he certainly wasn't going to come target another player on the Warriors. So that was an impossible situation. Again, I don't know what the fans feel about it, but that's just reality. Levine, you can almost kind of say the Warriors passed up on. a little bit. I mean, that Sacramento and San Antonio wanted to get a deal done at a point. The Warriors, it seems, weren't ready to get a deal done. I don't know how big a domino you view Levine as, but that was out there. He was on their radar. If you do go to a lesser level, I think my sense is fans would still like to see them get something done. I do think if they go medium game hunting, then it's probably going to be somebody that is under contract next year. It's reflippable this summer. They're not giving up too many assets. And we can go through, a few possible names there. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have been talking about it all day, but, that probably would be better to the fan base than getting off some money and ducking the tax. But that's probably the options we're talking about.
Slates, these guys. If they had called and asked for Steph Curry, what would they have said?
My guess, again, educated guess here, very interesting. We'll probably have to have a meeting that you could never leak to the public, but I mean, probably no, right? I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, and it never had to actually happen because, look, Nico Harrison has a relationship with Anthony Davis, and he clearly wanted a big, and he wanted that big. But, man, I mean, we could go team by team right here. What does Oklahoma City say? What does Minnesota say with Anthony Edwards? What does, name your team out there? Yeah,
it is interesting. Okay, and then sort of like piggybacking on what Dibbs just asked you, whether it's about what happened last weekend or not, there's been so much smoke about the Warriors and trades for months now. Where would you place the current likelihood that something happens by lunchtime Thursday?
Yeah, I think something happens. I think they're just sorting out the degree of something. Can they get something seismic done, or does it have to be more minor around the edges, repositioning themselves for a dream of the summer? That, again, I understand the frustration of the fan base, especially if Steph Curry's about to turn 37 years old next month, that by the time you maybe strike on something, it might be too late. It might already be too late, right? We've had these existential conversations for months now. But yeah, I do sense a desire by them to shake it up. And again, I think I've reported, I know that they've kind of shopped around their 2025 protected pick. Like, what could that potentially get on the market? And if that does get a guy that helps you now, maybe helps you next season, or helps you get to another guy this summer, it would make sense. What doesn't make sense, as we've talked about, is just, flinging everything at, a player that's only going to kind of marginally up you. But at this point, that doesn't seem to be what they're thinking.
Are they thinking at all about the possibility of including Draymond Green in the trade? And I wouldn't have thought about this last week, but the Lakers deal their second best player, who's clearly better than Draymond Green. But have you heard anything about them changing their approach about, who else might be somebody they would part with?
I would just put it this way: like, nobody around the Luka Doncic situation, reporters, best in the world, was aware that was happening. And I think it's a lower level scale, but similar. Like, I don't think I would know that Draymond Green is being shot, because I don't think they can have the world know if that was the case, right? Would I be, absolutely floored if it happened before Thursday? Not necessarily, but it's going to have to be done somewhat quietly because of the ramifications and the figures involved in the political nature of it. But have I personally thought about, if you're looking at the Wiggins contract, you're looking at the Draymond contract, you're trying to stair step? Certainly, I imagine it's a topic that's been broached, but again, nobody's going to tell me that right now.
Anthony, you said that we could go through some of the names, so I'm going to hold you to it. Let's go through some names and just get your reaction to the situation right now. How about Zion Williamson?
Big risk. I'm curious. I don't know. The Pelicans seem like a team that they're way out of the playoff race. They got all these very intriguing players. I don't know what they're necessarily doing. What about Brandon Ingram? What about CJ McCollum? What about Trey Murphy? And Zion is obviously a name there. He's got this interesting contract with a lot of outs, but he's still this potentially spectacular player. To your question on the Warriors, I think it's worth exploring, but I don't know what the asking price is, and I would group him in a lower tier, more riskier than Kevin Durant, or even in some ways Jimmy Butler.
And then what is your read on what is and is going to happen with LeBron James?
I mean, all the reporting out of there, including at our place, Joe Varden, who's known LeBron and everyone around LeBron for a while, said he's not waiving his no trade clause. So I just expect, he controls his own situation, at least until the summer. I expect he's going to play it out. And while the Anthony Davis departure probably shocks him in a lot of ways, I'd be kind of intrigued if I was him to see how him and Luka work, so why not play it out, obviously, in a place he prefers to live. His son is there. I mean, not that couldn't necessarily get solved, but all signs, and again, I'm a little bit more outside reading the people who are there and know them, is that he's just going to stay for the rest of the year.
And when you look at the summer, would it change the calculus at all? And the other piece of that, I guess, would be if he wanted to opt out and the Warriors were interested, he'd have to take a lot less money to fit him here, and that doesn't seem like that's been a part of the LeBron playbook.
Yeah, he's made it pretty clear, over time that, the max is too little money, right?
Yeah.
What he's worth to a franchise. And I think, Steph doesn't necessarily say it, but I think it's kind of a similar opinion on that. So, yeah, I don't think something like that would happen. Maybe, again, I know everybody's kind of talked about this Avengers scenario. Sure, I think it would intrigue a lot of people, but that's LeBron coming upstate, moving away from his family to play on Steph Curry's team. I still kind of have trouble seeing that materialize.
Anthony Slater is with us. You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco and Odyssey Sports Station. Always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube. Powered by First NorCal Credit Union. For a low-rate auto loan, apply online or just ask for First NorCal financing at the dealer. What about some of those other sort of smaller names out there, though I think they're still pretty big-time players? What about Cam Johnson, and what about Vucevic, now that the Bulls have shown they will be active?
Word for months now is that Brooklyn's asking price on Cam Johnson is much steeper than it was for Finney Smith, than it was for Dennis Schroeder. So, I don't know that they're going to hold to like a 2 first-round pick type thing, but I think at minimum they would get a high-value first-round pick. I know the Kings at one point were in discussions with them. I'm curious. The Kings got a 2031 Minnesota unprotected pick in the Fox deal. Could that get something like Cam Johnson done? We'll see. Anything could happen, but I don't sense from the Warriors that they view Cam Johnson as the type of piece that they should, kind of splurge, 2 first-rounders or an unprotected future first-rounder. So if you're not going to do that, I assume there's going to be somebody else out there that would.
Other names that are just, kind of random and maybe unreachable for the Warriors, Joel Embiid and Paul George for Philadelphia. Any idea about the potential that they'll be dealt?
Boy, we going down the list today.
Well, you said you could go down the list, right?
Yeah, we can. These aren't medium level swings. These are big swings. I think Paul George is interesting, right? They, however many months ago now, 6-7 months. Help me do the math, but they sat in the room together and pitched him on it, and Paul George wanted to do it. Obviously, we know the dynamics that split it up, and at this point, Paul George's contract looks a lot less appealing. So I do wonder, if that. Backs the Warriors off in a sense. I would say the only word I've gotten, this wasn't too recently, was that, Philly planned to keep him, at least through this cycle and through this season. Again, I would have told you the other day that all indications were Luka Doncic was going to stay with the Mavericks. So I don't want to guarantee anything, but I did hear that Philly preferred to keep Paul George.
Anthony, the Shams report this morning, I don't know if he meant it this way, but when he said the Warriors are literally calling every single team that has an all-star, to me, it made the Warriors sound desperate. Would you characterize it the same, that the Warriors are calling every and any all-star?
Every and any all-star, I don't know. I'm sure we could find one that they weren't. I'm sure they didn't make a Luka Doncic call. I don't think they're making a Shea call. Yeah. I don't think they're making a Shea call right now. A Wemby call, how about that?
Yeah.
So they're surveying, they're canvassing, and they, to a degree, yes, they are desperate. They'll even kind of, hint at that. Now, does desperation raise their price to an unwise level? We'll see. I don't think so. They've kind of messaged out they don't want to do that, but clearly, they're not only trying to gather info on the landscape now. I do think there's a belief, again, as much fervor that the fan base might have Thursday if they don't do something big. I do think there's a belief internally, even from Steph's side, that there's still a chance this summer when other guys might potentially come available and it's easier to be flexible. We'll see, but you want as much info as you can now to know what might even be up in the summer. And like I said, I think right now my sense is everybody, is waiting on this Jimmy, Kevin Durant, Phoenix, Miami, Bradley Beal type dominoes to fall over.
Last thing, Slates, is we got a game here in 2 hours. Bob Myers sort of insinuated that sometimes you let things around the deadline affect you too much. Is there anything riding on tonight and Wednesday in Utah or no?
I do not believe so. Mike Dunleavy, had plenty of conversation with him over the years. I'm sure you guys have had a few also. He's very level-headed, and like I think he's kind of understood who this team is. And I do think Joe Lacob maybe rides the roller coaster a little bit more, understandably. It's just the personality, and maybe that ups the motivation level a bit, considering what happens in the next two games. Generally, I think that they have a pretty firm belief of who they are and who they aren't this season, and they'll make a decision based on, the full scope of the season and what they are and what they are not. And I don't think like a win over a Magic team without Jalen Suggs tonight or beating Utah, for example, on Wednesday will change that.
Anthony, thank you for hopping in on game night. We appreciate it.
All right, fellas.
Okay, there he goes.